Hey there everybody, Eric from Outer Limitless coming at you today with another video. Now in today's video we're going to look at the NV20 night vision monocular from the company Mileseey. Now Mileseey makes products that are sort of engineering grade, laser rangefinders, leveling equipment, and in this case, night vision monocular. So these aren't going to be like incredibly super high end, but they're also not budget either. They're sort of right in the middle, so a nice quality sort of engineering grade product. Now night vision is something that I've been kind of dabbling with in the past. In prior videos, we've looked at some different products. So here, this is the glass condor from the company Creative XP and the NV3185 from the company Kinka. Now, at an initial glimpse, as you look at each one of these, they're pretty much different in overall size and overall features. That is one thing that I've learned about this sort of genre of product. These products are advancing quickly. Tons of companies are coming out with products like these. So with so many products now flooding the market, how do you know what you want and what to get into? Now, I can't promise to have all the answers. However, at this point, I definitely have some comparisons against sort of equivalent products in a way. I mean, again, not exactly the same, but definitely in that night vision monocular genre. So what we're gonna do, I'm gonna go through this in detail. I'm gonna show you the features. I'm gonna show you a bunch of footage for how I've used this, kind of talk through some of the different talking points and considerations that you're gonna need to make, and show you how it stacks up against some of its competitors. So in a lot of ways, some similarities, but in other ways, quite different. But with that said, I have a whole bunch to do and a whole bunch to share with you. And if you're interested in seeing a little bit more about what I'm about to get into, do me a favor, stay tuned. Now, before we get too far, I would like to say thank you very much to the people at Mileseey who did provide this for review. Now again, this is the NV20 from Mileseey. This is a night vision monocular. The first thing is it does start with 5 times optics. So 5 times optical zoom. So if you've used different devices like this in the past, if you've used spotting scopes, binoculars, rifle scopes, you are familiar with the idea of the optics and the multiplier. So a 5 times multiplier, and that is your optical zoom. But then this also has 8 times digital zoom. Now again, if you're familiar with cell phones and digital cameras that have digital zoom, you realize that digital zoom is nowhere as clear as optical zoom. The optical zoom using the glass and the actual digital zoom just sort of interpolating the picture as it moves deeper and deeper and further out into the distance. Now overall, this has a number of different buttons. We're going to run through the basic overview on the features real quick just to get you oriented. And so as we take a quick look at the exterior, the first thing you'll see, nicely made, very robust. This feels like a quality piece of equipment. And when you compare it side by side against the Creative XP glass condor, which is very nice, this is significantly lighter, like lighter plastics, probably lighter optics inside. This is, again, a little more engineering grade. You can see based on sort of how stout the knobs and the different buttons and the overall just ability to control this. It's just very firm. Everything moves sort of, I don't know, it's just got that nice firm and tight feel to it. Not again that the Creative XP isn't nice, it is. I like it a lot. It's just not quite as refined. And especially compared to this Kinka, the Kinka extremely lightweight. I mean, this honestly feels kind of like a toy in comparison. And when you look at the size of the objective lens, I mean, very, very different. And even the infrared emitter. So on the front here, the infrared emitter, you can see here just completely different the way these are built. So again, the Mileseey NV20, very nicely done. Now here is your power button. That's how you turn this on. This here is some of your mode buttons, so changing between the modes. This also doubles as a zoom button. So if you long press, that will change between the modes, and a quick press, and that will zoom. Now on the side, this is your infrared emitter, so turning the infrared emitter on and off. And this also does have some function as like an enter button when you're in some of the menus. And then your up and down arrows, again, can be used for zoom. And as you're in the menus, this allows you to pan up and down between the different parts of the menu. On your objective lens, here you have your focus. Very smooth and feels really good. In fact, the more I use this, it is loosening up just a bit. It was quite tight at first, but at this point, very, very smooth. And on the back, your diopter. So you do kind of use these in combination to fine tune your focus. Now, what I did find is you have the ability to take photos and video with this. So you can put this on video mode, and when you do, the focus on the front of the objective lens is actually changing the focus on the video. I do not believe the diopter adjustment is changing the actual focus on your video feed. I'm not positive of that, but it did not appear to. Now underneath here, you can see these are your connection points. So you end up with the ability to put a compact flash card, a micro SD card, and then a USB Type-C connector. This is your charging port, but also allows you to connect this device to a computer. I have done this. I have actually downloaded my footage, so leveraging the card inside to store the footage, and then the cable to my computer to actually download it. This is nice and firm and feels pretty good and sits down nice and clean to keep that protected. Now here you can see the ability to attach this to a tripod. So down here you'll see your standard connection, and you can put the little boot on here, and it's worked very effectively for me. In the back here, you'll see this is the port for your battery. So as we open this up, looks to be one of their own batteries. It's nondescript. It doesn't have any true markings or definition on it, but Mileseey reporting that it is a 3.7 volt, 2000 milliamp hour battery. So now that we've talked about the general features, let's take a look at some of the footage. So here you can see getting the Mileseey NV20 out into some good field use. Now, it was a snowy night. It's pretty much pitch black here, with the exception being there's a little bit of moonlight. But here you can see tripod mounting the NV20. It definitely works fairly well, but you can see it's still a little bit difficult to navigate. These types of devices are really cool, but at the same time, they definitely have a little bit of a learning curve, getting things nice and smooth and even without the footage being choppy, making sure that you can get the focus dialed in without running your hands in front of the IR illuminator. Now, the first thing you'll notice is I had my date settings completely wrong. It took me a little bit to figure out the menus, and you'll notice that later on in some of the additional footage, I definitely got things squared away. Now, as you can see, I'm working through my focus, trying to get things dialed in. This is using the IR emitter. You do have the ability to run the night vision with or without it, but even with the snow cover, it was definitely dark enough. I did need the IR emitter. You can clearly see the water moving in the river here. It is definitely very cool. If there was an animal or something worth noting, I'm fairly certain I would definitely see it. Now, this is the underside of the bridge abutment. You can see here as I try to get my focus dialing in. It is made of stone. It's really cool. And then panning down, you can definitely see the water here rushing pretty quick down this river. Now, again, if there was something worth noting, I would definitely see it. This is fairly detailed when you look at it. However, at the same time, it really is a little bit difficult to see sometimes through the actual viewfinder. It is an LED, so it's blaring in your eyes in this particular night. It was literally freezing cold, so my hands were getting numb. I was struggling just a little bit, but overall, when I took my time, because this was on a tripod, I was able to finally get things dialed in and really get my focus to the point where you could make out some objects into the distance. Now, even though not the smoothest, I would say this is still fairly effective. And as I continue to move on, you'll see here panning along the shoreline, trying to keep the focus. That is one thing. This is fully manual focus. There is no autofocus. So each time you move and as you're changing the distance away and trying to focus on different objects, you do need to operate the focus. Now, sometimes I find my hand gets in the way of the infrared emitter. It kind of messes with the vision, but overall you can see this works fairly well on the first IR setting. Something worth mentioning, you will notice that the actual picture here is smaller than the size of the frame. This is a 720p video feed, and the video that you're watching is a 1080 video rendering. So that's why the video that you're seeing is actually a little smaller than on the screen itself. But moving through the different IR modes, increasing the intensity, you'll notice that it does bring out additional detail in the trees and further off into the distance. So as I'm looking at these trees, trying to keep this relatively smooth, I'm doing my best, but this is at fairly significant distance. Again, this is a 5 times optical zoom. So this is 5 times from what I would actually be seeing, and that's ignoring the fact that this also has 8 times digital zoom. So increasing the intensity on the IR emitter and trying to look off into the distance. Now, the messed up part is when you do bump into things in the foreground, it really does get quite washed out. So it's a little bit disorienting as you're trying to work through the picture. But if you take your time and stay focused and really pay attention to what you're trying to see through the objective lens, you can eventually get it there. Doing my best here to get back on the water, seeing if there's anything worth noting along the shoreline and kind of up into the trees. Again, fairly effective, yet at the same time a little bit choppy. Now at this point, moving off into the distance and trying to utilize the digital zoom. These logs you see that have fallen over are way off into the distance. These are a fairly good distance away. Now at this time, in the dark, with the type of sensor in the NV20, and the fact that, quite honestly, it was just freezing, I definitely struggled to get a good, clear picture. If you don't have a tripod, this would be almost impossible, but leveraging the tripod and the digital zoom, you can see I'm getting a fairly reasonable picture. It's not the most crisp. There is quite a bit of noise, but overall, this is working just fine. Toggling between the different intensity modes here with the IR emitter, and actually working the zoom. Here you can see zooming back out from that 8 times digital zoom and then working back towards that 5 times optical zoom. Getting a better overall picture here, you can see what the general surroundings look like. Now in this particular case, you can see using an infrared flashlight. This is really cool. I love the idea that you can use an infrared flashlight, either 850 or 940 nanometers. And this is a very interesting test. You can see here using the night vision monocular and taking the flashlight, increasing the intensity as well as the beam pattern, getting a nice even beam and even illumination. With the infrared flashlight, this works extremely well. Now doing some additional testing, you can see I finally did fix the actual date stamp. So here, taking a look down my driveway, this is about 80 feet away. You can see as I work through the modes, changing the infrared mode. So going from standard to infrared 1, infrared 2, infrared 3. And what I did find was after getting the infrared mode fully adjusted, I realized that this was slightly out of focus. So making some adjustments and trying to improve my picture. Now looking the opposite direction, you can see here a good test of what this looks like on a fixed tripod, not moving around, but keeping the image fixed. This is essentially pitch black. When you look at this B-roll footage, you'll notice that it is extremely dark in my neighborhood, almost pitch black, but using the night vision monocular, even without the infrared mode, very effective. But here, as we change the infrared mode, you can actually hear using the microphone.
Standard, infrared, infrared 1, infrared 2, infrared 3.
And so a pretty good picture overall with this on a tripod and nice and steady. But what about those zoom modes? Again, leveraging the microphone on the actual unit itself.
Standard zoom times 1 times 2 times 3 times 4 times 5 times 6 times 7 times 8.
And so all in all, a very good test. You can see the overall performance of the Mileseey NV20. Not too bad, a little bit grainy, definitely something cool and something I need to continue to experiment with. So you can see here for this test, I have this set up and I'm literally looking at the box that it came in. So at this point you can see, looking through this, that gives you a bit of an example of the type of zoom. So that's the standard zoom at 5 times as it's looking towards the box. Again, very nice. I definitely struggled a little bit at first. I mean, that's the thing with a device like this. You kind of need to, I'd say, get used to it and settle into it. Figure out how to use it, get used to the buttons, kind of how the layout is. And a lot of these buttons are multi-function, so you kind of fumble through them a bit until you get used to it. Obviously, at first, I had my settings kind of whacked. I had the date all set wrong, and eventually, over time, I figured out how to get into the menu and actually make some corrections. So it just takes time. Now, this, to me, is something that I would say is useful for general outdoor use or maybe some level of surveillance. The thing that I really like the most is the fact that you can use it with the infrared flashlights. That to me is phenomenal. The idea being that at that point, you can literally be pretty much completely stealth. Now, you do have one significant disadvantage. The problem that I have with this type of device is the fact that when you're looking through it, you're closing one eye, it's pitch black, and you're blaring essentially the equivalent of like a 200-inch TV. When you get that close and you actually stare at it, I mean, think of the equivalent size and diameter of a TV. It would be like me sitting in front of a massive screen and projecting it straight into my eye. When I take this device away, one eye can see fine, the other one completely blurry. It is extremely disorienting, so in that regard, I have actually found that night vision binoculars, and not monoculars, but binoculars, are a little bit better, where you don't need to stick it like all the way up to your eye. You can actually look at it from a little bit of a distance. You don't need to really like kill your vision. You can see it from a little bit further away, and that way when you back away from the device, your eyes aren't completely messed up. And even if they are a little bit sort of like blind to the light, they're both blind to the light, not one and not the other. So the problem with the monocular is really that sort of disorientation factor. So when it comes to things like surveillance, you definitely need to be careful. It depends on your scenario. It depends on how like imminent a threat you may have, but it definitely gives you an advantage. The other thing is the daytime footage, it's okay, but why would I go to this when I could go to more of a standard optic without the technology? I mean, just something that's literally optics and no digital zoom. So do these have a place? Yes and no. Are these at this point a little gimmicky? Maybe a little bit. Could you use it as a hunter? I don't know. I'm not the hunting type, so how effective is it? I don't really know. Definitely has a place. I think it takes some experimentation. You need to be somebody who actually has the need. But overall, it's definitely cool. And I love the fact that the technology is advancing. Every single one of these devices I've looked at has actually been a little bit better and a little bit better in a fairly short amount of time. I mean, within a matter of months, I've seen some significant advances. And the fact that this actually has sort of the like inclinometer inside and you're kind of seeing what degree everything's falling at, it's just kind of cool. Is it completely useful? Hard to say, but at the same time, this is definitely nice, and as I mentioned, leaning more towards that engineering grade. And so again, I'd like to say thank you very much to the people at Mileseey for providing this full review, and for the rest of you, if you like this content, do me a favor, check me out on my primary Outer Limitless channel, which I did check out this Creative XP glass condor. On that channel, I have all kinds of things for the hiking, camping, and backpacking genre. So from the electronics and gear all the way through my sleep systems, knives, axes, backpacks, flashlights, you name it, that's my Outer Limitless YouTube channel. So all right, guys, thanks for stopping by. I hope you like what you saw. I hope you found it a little bit informative. If you like what you saw, please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Take care now. I'll see you soon.